Good morning, folks. And Councillor Rigby has just left the room. Excellent. I can start without Councillor Rigby. I am advised. And welcome to our November executive. And just before we start, can I just congratulate and welcome Mandy Chilcott as newly elected leader of the Conservative Group, leader of the opposition, and I of course wish her many years in that role. But I know that she will provide constructive challenge to us at all points.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wishing it's a short time in this.
And also just to note the success of Bridgewater Carnival on Saturday as well, and those lead members who participated in the squibbing, and I'm sure we'll have no fireworks today as a result of that, and to thank all our council teams for all their involvement with both highways and with street cleansing in order to be able to facilitate those events. Right, so it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this executive meeting and remind those present that only members in the room that are taking decisions, those other members are in attendance to provide advice, and there are no planned fire drills today. In the event of a fire alarm, please follow the fire exit signs, congregate in the car park. If anybody present might need assistance in exiting the building, then please let one of the Democratic Services team know. The agenda and papers have been published on the council website in advance of this meeting, and the council recognises the importance of striking a balance between providing opportunities for the lawful expression of views and any unacceptable behaviours or actions that cause disruption or can lead to our meetings being adjourned. The council will be making a recording of the meeting, and this will be published in due course. Can I further highlight that today's meeting will be run using a hybrid format. Executive lead members and key officers are physically present in the John Meikle room at Dean House, and other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting to speak on specific agenda items or to observe. And the meeting is being broadcast, and therefore other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely. Can I further remind of the good practice in following hybrid meetings, only to use the chat function for the purposes of the meeting, and please, if you wish to indicate to speak, please raise your hand if you're able to do so and say your name before speaking. Otherwise, please can you turn your microphone on and camera off when not speaking. So first on our agenda, we have apologies for absence. We have Councillor Graham Oakes online and not in the room. It's good to see Graham returning to good health, and thank you very much. Any other members' apologies? No, not seeing any. So we move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of October 2024. I'll take you all. We've all read. Any changes, comments, Councillor Randall Green?
Yes, Chairman, good morning, thank you. Yes, I was at the meeting and actually also the previous one, and it hasn't been recorded.
Okay, we'll make that amendment to the minutes. Any other amendments? Can I see a proposal for those then, please? Councillor Shearer, seconded. Councillor Lyshawn. Those in favour, those against, duly agreed and signed. Thank you. Are there any declarations other than those relating to City, Town and Parish Council memberships? No, not seeing any. And we move on to public question time. We've not had a public question in time for the deadline, but we do have a member question for executive, which is very welcome. And I'd like to invite Councillor Ellis to speak, please. You are welcome to come to the front. You're welcome to stay there if you have a microphone.
Thank you so much. Yes, my question is about the future of the Mary Street High Street car park, which is very much exercising my constituents and many across the town. At the time of writing, it's now over 1,600 residents have signed a petition asking Somerset Council to think again and put the sale of the car park on hold rather than sell it to a developer for housing, because they're deeply concerned about the social and economic impact of the potential loss of this car park, which would affect the viability of key arts and social venues and businesses in the vicinity. There are some 7 different places of worship along that stretch of road, which do a variety, not just services in the daytime and the evening, but also lots of social activities and really vital community services. I recently visited Kingdom Church Southwest, and I saw their amazing facilities for children and families, and the work that they do around debt management and providing a safe space for people in very challenging circumstances is really inspirational. And older and disabled people have been telling us in their droves about their issues about accessing vital services if that car park is lost. So it's a massive issue, and I think our people would like Somerset Council to come to a fuller understanding and appreciation of why that specific car park is so crucial. It's also the only one in the area with evening parking. So getting rid of it will really have a massive impact. Also, a lot of women have said to me, I don't feel safe parking further away. If I'm going to an event at the Creative Innovation Centre or the Lawns, if it's at night, you know, they might cycle in during the day, but at night they probably take the car, and they don't feel safe walking in the dark, perhaps on their own, to access something. So people won't just go, well, we can just use another car park, we'll park further away. There will be a lot of people who won't do that. They'll either stay at home and they will lose social contact and activities, or they will go, you know, to another town potentially. We've also got the loss of 12 disabled parking bays, which are really vital. There are a lot of people who have mobility impairments but don't use wheelchairs, who rely on that car park for easy access to the high street and businesses there. And we haven't, at the moment, the package hasn't included any mitigation. So I just would like a sense that we're understanding and agreeing that the grave concerns expressed warrant a sort of a bit of a pause and a bit of a think, look at the economic impact, the social impact, impact on venues, some of which might close, and we do not want that. We you know, Taunton is a destination for arts and culture and social activities, and I think we need to also engage a bit more with local residents and businesses and community groups to understand their lived experiences. And I also would just wonder if they are willing to consider alternatives to selling the land to a developer for housing, which would nonetheless provide a route to closing the budget gap. So my friends at Taunton Town Council will shoot me for raising this, but you know, there is a town council there that wouldn't mind an asset, money-raising asset. That could be an option. Or what a lot of people are really interested in is the prospect of maybe building housing above. So retaining some ground level parking and going up, building up housing. So then you get, you know, myriad benefits from that, and you need that accessible evening time parking. The only other option would be to think about mitigation. So you've got the loss of the disabled spaces, you've got the lack of evening parking. You'd have to open up Orchard car park, you know, every day, not just just for specific events. And just finally, I think we were all caught a bit unawares on the hop with this. We've had all sorts of fires to put out because of the financial emergency, and I didn't anticipate the level of concern here. I'll be absolutely honest. So I just think in future, if we could do some quick engagement with residents and businesses in the vicinity whenever we're looking at selling an asset, just to check, are there going to be any unintended consequences? I think that would be great going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis, and thank you for putting forward those views on behalf of your local residents so well. It's Councillor Mike Rigby to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much, Councillor Ellis, for your question. We do understand the levels of concern from local residents and others about the loss of the car park at High Street. The Council's response to the financial emergency has been to establish a financial strategy which includes a sales target for surplus assets. The High Street car park has been put forward for release by Parking Services, as they've identified that capacity can be met by the council's alternative car parking provisions close by, and that these alternative sites can accommodate both the daytime and evening demand. The High Street car park was one of 22 sites brought forward to scrutiny prior to the executive, so there was full transparency on the range of assets identified as surplus. Local members have been informed that this car park would be considered by the Scrutiny Corporate and Resources, and again that it would be discussed at the executive meeting on the 5th of August. Taunton Town Council was also notified of the proposals before the scrutiny and executive meetings. Based on the advice of the Equalities team, a quality impact assessment were not required for the disposal of the original list of 22 commercial sites, of which the High Street car park formed part. With regards to the opportunity to dispose of the High Street car park to the Town Council, Somerset Council has an obligation to dispose of their land and properties for the best consideration that can reasonably be obtained. As we are awaiting the outcome of planning guidance, it's too early to determine a disposal route at this stage. Selling the site to the Town Council, though, is an option, and they would always be welcome to submit an offer. But a redevelopment of the site would also bring fresh investment to the town, and as already identified, the High Street car park is surplus to requirements. At this stage, no decisions have been taken other than to review the outcome of the planning pre-application request, which seeks to understand what alternative uses could be accommodated on site. This in turn will inform the market value and disposal options for the site, and we will continue to provide updates for all stakeholders as this matter progresses, and you'll get a fuller written response as well. And just in response to your final point there about the possibility of having car parking and redevelopment within the same proposal, that certainly hasn't been ruled out either. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. As it's a member question, you are entitled to a follow-up if you wanted, Councillor Ellis, or are you happy with the answer?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the car parking plus option. I just think it would be really good to put something out to residents formally and businesses, just to kind of assure them that this isn't a done deal, you know, that there are options being looked at, and that we understand their concerns. Something, I think that would be very helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the comments that we've had, we do understand, and the concerns and all options are being explored to look at how we can both resolve the financial emergency and meet the needs of all the communities in Taunton as well. So we appreciate the concerns being raised, and we will do what we can to either mitigate or respond to those. Moving on to executive forward plan. Any questions or comments on the forward plan? Not seeing anyone indicating, so we'll move on to item 6, which is the Somerset Council Improvement and Transformation Programme. It's our November update. It's on pages 19 to 48, and Councillor Theobald-Philip to introduce.
Yes, just to introduce the monthly report. I've got it down as the October progress report, but I think that's because it's November and it records what happened in October. Just to present this monthly report, in particular draw members' attention to the dashboard attached to it, and particularly to the list of project risks which have changed over the past month. I'll hand over to Alan Jones.
Thank you, Chair. So we wanted to highlight, as we do each month, as part of the request from you, that we saw an update on each and every project that was running within the transformation programme as it currently stands. In addition to that as well, we've also shared elements of the restructuring proposals that have been included as part of the staff consultation, and also, as Councillor Buck-Philip has already mentioned, we've also included all of the risk register now, so you can see each of the changes and the mitigating actions that are being put in place. One of the main changes that we've also added into this month is also a progress update. So we've been reporting that at an officer level. We wanted to make sure that was now brought into the member domain, so you can see the progress against those mitigation measures. That's been part of the key feedback that we've had from scrutiny and also from audit. So you can see the work that is being developed in order to address the mitigation measures as part of that. For example, one of the key areas around our digital strategy and the need to mitigate and have that approach with all of our change work. So the ICT programme now has that progress bar attached to it, so you can see the work that's being delivered. So I wasn't going to go into too much detail, Chair, at that point. I have Lou Routley and Sarah Cretney with me today to help answer any questions and queries you may have. But at that point, I'll stop. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any comments or questions from Leader Associate members? Councillor Wakefield. Good morning, Sarah.
Yes, good morning, Chair. I'm a bit concerned about the risks. I'm sure everybody is. I'm wondering if there's a risk to community safety if the services we provide aren't able to be kept going in the way we hope. And I mean, there's all sorts of parts of the council that are undergoing very significant change as a result of this. One of my concerns is our planning lawyers, who I believe are all on locum contracts, and I'm very worried that they're all going to disappear very quickly under the scheme of not continuing with locum contracts. And I just want to know how we're going to be assured that there will be enough support, because it's all very well saying you'll go out into the market and recruit people, but there are not people out there to recruit. I understand and I believe. So I'm very, very worried about that. I mean, also added to that is, as I said, about community safety. I'm worried about the business as usual side of it as well, which I know we all hope and believe is going to stay on track. But I'm worried that with the changes that are happening, there could be problems that we may have them down as risks. But it's very difficult to mitigate against that when you've got such a big change going on. It's a really huge amount of reorganisation that's happening. So I just wanted to express that on behalf of people listening and anybody else here. I know I'm one of the executive and I know I'm there to try and mitigate these risks, but I just want to express it as something that I think is a very real concern.
Jones to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely valid concerns, and part of the restructuring exercise that we're going through will be desperately unsettling for a number of staff. What we are, at a global level, what we are trying to achieve is stability and certainty for a number of staff that have been in interim arrangements across the organisation. So first and foremost, we hope that that will be a significant step forward. Clearly, what we need to do is make sure that all of the proposals that have come forward as part of the restructure have those impacts fully assessed, and we know what those impacts are going to be and how they are going to be mitigated, if they can be mitigated. Part of that is also working out how services will be changed as part of that process. We have captured some of the risks at the moment. So, for example, in the risk register, IPT06 sets out some of the activities that we're putting in. So that's around the risk to a significant change, but also the ability to retain and recruit people as we go through this significant change. There are a number of mitigation measures that are being put in place. However, they still don't reduce the target score significantly. So we need to relook at that as part of our people strategy to work out how do we manage this how do we manage this amount of change? But it is a real risk for this organisation as we go through this. And until we have that certainty at the end of the consultation process, it's a risk we're going to have to continue to manage and mitigate, unfortunately. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rigby, good morning, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. It's the points that Councillor Wakefield's raised are really valid. I've had conversations with planning agents who have seen their applications take 10 weeks just to be outsourced. So we seem to have so little legal capacity to even outsource the work to a third party. That's a real worry. I know that we have a general desire to see fewer locums because they're expensive, but the reason that we have locums is because we can't find permanent staff. We can't find permanent staff because we're some way off having the JE process reviewed. That kind of leaves us in limbo potentially for 18 months, and we can't have that. So I've set the challenge to HR to make sure that as we have this general desire to have fewer locums, that we don't damage the services. I think we're all of a view that planning isn't operating at a level that we'd like it to as things stand. What we cannot do is make that worse. And so there has to be, I think, some consideration of how we get from that point of having a considerable number of locums to having fewer or no locums, but not then having no one in those positions. So that's the challenge that I've set. I mean, effectively, rather than having the 18 months during which the JE process will be reevaluated, we've got 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And to Councillor Rigby's point, absolutely recognise the challenges within our planning service, and part of the work that's been going on for some time to be able to look at those individual challenges in the service and what measures can be taken, and also looking at how we can use things like retention allowances, not only in the planning team alone, but also using that within our legal team if we need to be able to address those issues. So whilst the pay and grading review is a large piece of work and a significant issue, there are a number of measures that we can deploy to address that. but absolutely recognise that we need to continue to focus on that. Continue to focus on it to make sure those measures are effective, that we're paying the right recruitment and retention allowances in those instances where we need to, but also how do we convert some of those locums into employed staff, and what are the broader conditions to that. And as we know from previous conversations with our HR team, that's one of the key focuses around those areas where we've got particular pressures, and why things like changes in planning, for example, weren't put through as part of the VR requests and weren't put through as part of the CR requests. So we want to make sure that we're creating some stability, but it's not the only team, and we need to be really clear how we're being used, why we're being used, why it's being used, and what impact it's having. And that's the work that the workforce team are focusing on at the moment. Thank you for the question.
Councillor Federica Smith-Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The first one might be for Duncan in relation to employee and staff morale at the moment, just to see how that's looking, because when we sit and look about where we're going, we've still got to think about where we are now and what is business as usual, and the public expect the same from us regardless of what we're going through. And I guess that leads me to my second point, which is the wider context from what we've just heard about planning is around the KPIs, or where are we seeing those pressures, and is there a way of seeing that? I know we get our monthly reports, but it's almost that lifetime analysis as we go through this restructure to know where those kind of pinch points are, because we can say that we all hear that planning is taking 8 to 10 weeks, but what about the other areas? And I think for me, it's just staff morale is the big thing, and how we continue to support as an organisation, but also as members, but also get the public to understand what we're going through.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I think there's two different things in the question. First thing, in terms of where we are in terms of staff morale, what's going on, it's a really tough time in the council. And I think what we're seeing very clearly is we've got lots of people who are struggling. So obviously we've announced potentially 450, up to 450 additional job losses on top of the VR programme and the work we've already been doing to restructure management to reduce numbers elsewhere. It's tough. What's really clear is people are finding it tough differentially. So some of our predecessor organisations are quite used to change, have been through big changes themselves in previous years, and therefore colleagues have got that experience, understand the mechanisms and the process. I think it's fair to say at least one, if not a couple of our predecessor organisations really weren't used to that level of change. And therefore we've got some colleagues who are really finding it very, very difficult. So we spent a lot of time and energy trying to explain to people, whilst it's difficult, whilst the numbers are big and scary, and if people are impacted, clearly it has an impact on them. The vast majority of our staff will slot into the current job they're doing in the new structure as they are in the old structure, and there'll be no impact. So that is the vast majority of our staff. We're not talking about losing large numbers in terms of percentages, but clearly this is an individual issue. If you're affected, it affects you. In some teams, we're having to put a large number of people at risk because we may have 2 or 3 jobs fewer than the number of people we've got, which of course creates uncertainty. At this point in time, we're not seeing, as a result of that process, significant issues with performance. That might happen, but I would hope not. I've got a huge amount of confidence in our colleagues. As much as this is tough and people are struggling, we employ professionals. These are good people. They care about the people. They care about the services they're delivering. So I would hope, despite the fact that there's a lot of pressure on individuals and the fact that they're struggling, it shouldn't start to impact on service delivery. So it is tough. You know, you ask about morale. Morale is difficult right now in the organisation. People want certainty. We can't give them, because we need fair processes to make sure we appoint people appropriately. But that doesn't mean we can say, yes, you're fine and you're not, as quickly as people would like us to. But we have spent a lot of time and energy as well on support, and there's a lot of support available to colleagues who might be affected right now. So I'm hoping we've made it as easy as it can be, recognising it's really difficult. The one thing I would say, so there's a couple of things conflated. There are particular issues in the planning service, which I think we've been working on for a few months now, well, more than a few months, where we really are struggling. It's Councillor Wakefield's original point. We just cannot recruit sufficiently. So at this point in time, for the first time, as of 2 weeks ago, for the first time in a while, we had pretty much every planning job covered, with lots of agency and interims, as well as our own staff as well. That's the first time in a while we've actually been able to get that many planners in the organisation. But Councillor Rigby's point, Councillor Wakefield's point, really well made. If all the things that support those planning decisions, such as lawyers, such as the admin team, the technical support team in planning, we can't get the work through there. The work goes through various stages, and it does mean we've got problems. So whilst the PIs in planning on the face of it are holding up, that's because PI is a very odd measure. It only measures the applications you've approved. There's a huge amount of applications sat in the work in hand, which when they start to get approved will be later than timeline, and you will see that impact on the PI. So planning PI is probably an odd one about what's happening right now, because it doesn't measure what's happening right now. But we are looking, and Councillor Rigby's joining us on the Planning Stability Board, I think this week, whenever it is, in the very near future. And we're going to be looking at having more measures about what's happening with the work in progress, where we can see that's growing, not shrinking. And that effectively means that the backlog is getting bigger. So despite us having full cover, nearly full cover now, with lots of colleagues from interim and agencies, we're still not getting the workload down, which might mean when we inherited this position from predecessor councils, we may not have actually had enough plans to start with. And that's maybe being hidden by some of the COVID grant money and other things that were going on as well. So we're just working all that through.
Councillor Wilkins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we're all very aware of the huge amounts of work that is being done, in particular to understand the implications of the changes, and it's a real credit to your team to really nail that down. But at the end of the day, when the dust has settled, that there presumably is another piece of work to understand, or it will certainly throw up probably things that we haven't quite understood before. So how much, I'll call it wiggle room, do we have to make changes after the event to try and shore up and make sure our KPIs are mitigated as fully as possible?
Thank you very much, Chair. No, thank you for that question. Wiggle room's an interesting concept. There will definitely be some wiggle room about how we prioritise the resources we have left. But the reason we're in this position is obviously we have a structural deficit on the budget, which we need to close. So financial wiggle room is very limited, but we still have a duty to deliver services. So we may well have to look at reprioritisation of the existing resource or the remaining resource to make sure we are covering gaps. There will be a few areas we know where, there should be a few areas where we can actually work really carefully through transformation programme to say, actually, we can do things differently. We can reduce process. We can increase productivity. We can make sure we're actually using technologies to its best impact. There might be a couple of areas where we actually have to talk very carefully to people about how we change what we do on a day-to-day basis. But if there are any issues that affect service standards where we're deliberately saying that there will be a lesser service, then that will be a conversation that we'll be having with members before we get to that position, obviously. And then that can feed into the budget setting conversation, which we'll be having in February about where members want to prioritise the services that we have.
Thank you. Heather Shearer next.
Hi, thank you, and thanks for all of the reports. I'm looking just specifically on page 29, which is about the monthly dashboard. Just had a couple of questions about the innovation and change one, which is coming up as red. Interesting, the PMO underneath it also has a kind of an evens, but that comes as amber. So I get a bit confused by the colours sometimes, but I just wanted to know a little bit more about how that got into the red category, because I think innovation and change obviously is really key. The notes talk about the IT transformation programme and the sort of matrix of priorities, but I just wondered if you could just help me understand a little bit more about why that is red and what the kind of mitigations are about moving it on.
Hi, yeah, thank you for that question. So one of the ways in which it comes out as red, and I think you were mentioning in terms of the arrows, upwards and downward arrows, and so this is something that I just explained that bit first. So that means has there been a change since the last report? So what that's really saying is that this is still at red. So similarly, the PMO one's still at amber, whereas the others have either gone down or up That's what those arrows are referring to. In terms of the innovation and change part of the programme, one of the significant risks that you'll see in the risk register is about the resources that we have available in terms of our digital data and technology, and the work that we need to do that Duncan was referring to earlier in terms of how we change the way in which we work. One of the things that we're working on, so there are some mitigations in there, and you'll see the progress reports around our progress that we're making is around how we prioritise the resources and investment, making sure that we are doing that in relation to those key areas. What we know is we can't do everything that the council wants to do in terms of improvements to our IT and our technology. So we have to be really, really clear about how we're prioritising that. That is current work. It's going, so the prioritisation approach and draft matrix is going to the transformation board this afternoon. That is why it's staying at red at the moment, because those mitigations are not yet in place. I hope that helps clarify.
Just very briefly, and it doesn't have to be answered here, but thank you for that. It's really helpful. I mean, I just think for the entire council that being able to automate or get the maximum out of IT or case management or customer management, all of it sits around the IT touches every part of the council. So I just wondered, and you don't have to tell me this now, but I understand if I think if capital flexibility does allow us to use capital receipts for transformational work, would you be perhaps considering, and you might be, and that's for the transformation board rather than here, would you be considering perhaps getting more resource on IT, or are we talking about using the resources we currently got? I just think it'd be quite, from the, it's a bit carry on from the locum debate. I think it, where we can invest in more resources to move it on, it'd be really helpful.
Thank you, Chair. An absolute killer question in terms of the next stages around transformation and being able to ensure we have a longer term plan. We were clear, and you were clear as executive in January, February and April when you approved the approach to transformation, which is around dealing with the workforce issues in particular and the other aspects of the programme. What is really clear though is that that takes us to a particular position. So the next stage will be looking at the wider transformation programme, looking at that automation, and there will be a need for that resource undoubtedly as part of that to be able to automate some of those areas. We are not there yet though, because at the moment we are dealing with the workforce elements of change in particular, and we also need to ensure that we are rationalising and improving how we do that work. So at this stage, whilst we go through the significant element of our rather basic transformation at this stage, that we now need to sort out how we do transformation, because different approaches across the organisation to how we transform services. We now need to bring that together in accordance with the LGA's advice, and then from that we'll have a stable platform in which you would be able to do the transformation that you're describing. But there will undoubtedly be a resource ask associated with some of those big parts of change, and that also means we need to be able to prioritise where we spend our time, because we won't be able to do everything at the same time. So where do we get the biggest, and pardon the expression, bang for our buck?
And I want to bring in Maria Christophe as well, please.
In answer to your question, Councillor Shearer, in terms of funding for transformation, within agenda item 8 in Appendix B, Table 1, we are making provision for about £15 million worth of transformation to be funded by flexibility of capital receipts. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that can happen in the transformation programme is eligible for being used this way, but we're making this provision, and we will assess each transformation programme to understand whether it's eligible for the flexible use in capital receipts or indeed a different way of funding.
Okay, Councillor Wakefield next.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I just wanted to say, just to slightly lighten the mood, that we have been in adult social care privileged to have the Newton Europe Transformation Programme, which has and is saving us money. So it is a transformation that can happen and is happening. It is the effective use of data and new ways of working, new ways of thinking about working. So that can be really positive, and I'm really hopeful that this transformation will result in that across the council. So it can be done. So don't lose hope, everybody. My other point was one of the main risks here is insufficient budget for redundancies, and we're still waiting, I believe, to hear about the capitalisation directive and whether it's been finally approved. So I just wondered if there was any update on that.
Do you want to take the final question there first, and I'll come back to Alan?
So we're in the process of made the application. My expectation is that we will receive it, but we haven't had that confirmation as yet.
And just very, very quickly, Chair, I think a perfect example for Councillor Wakefield in terms of the work that Newton have been doing with us as part of that transformation piece. One of the key elements as well is making sure we don't lose the benefit of that, the approach, the methodology, the way in which they've captured the benefits, and also the way in which we can hear the teams within adult social care in particular talking about the language of change and transformation as part of their daily work. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we want to capitalise on. So for us, it's not a case of developing a new approach to transformation, it's learning the approach to transformation that we've already developed and benefited from external support, and then how do we make that and stretch that across the rest of the organisation. And I think the work that Newton have been doing with us, and in fairness, the leadership that's been shown within adult social care, has been able to demonstrate what can be achieved as part of that process. So learning from that as opposed to redoing it.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other lead members or associate lead members indicating, so go to other members, and I've got Faber Prick on the line first.
Thank you. I'm sorry I can't be there this morning. I didn't think you guys would want my germs, so apologies for not being with you in person. I think that what's really clear from this report is that we're working on a really high risk programme, and the thing that we can't change is the impact if any of this stuff goes wrong. So my questions are more around the mitigation and your confidence in that mitigation. We've got 6 of these risks that are related to resource, and there's been lots of conversation about resource, and we know that it's a difficult time for people within the council and everybody's working really hard to make things happen. One of my questions is around actually those who are choosing to leave. We know that the people who are there are working to their best and performing to their best, but are we seeing an increase in the number of people who are choosing to leave the council based on the statistics we have over previous years? Are people choosing with their feet to go elsewhere? And then looking at the mitigation to those risks, how confident are you that they are sufficient and that they are achievable? And more importantly, the timeliness of them, because when I look at the programme, when I look at what we're trying to achieve, there's a lot around timing, and I'm not seeing that within the mitigation. We're seeing the progress through them, which I think is really useful to be able to see where it's happening, but not when it needs to happen by, to make sure that the programme is safe. And then just by the nature of the way that this reporting works, there is a lot within this report that is now out of date. So just a question really to the officers, how many of the products and milestones that were showing green as due to be delivered on page 3 are now delivered according to the date that we're on now? And has there been any movement in the red risks that were due to be updated on the 1st of November? Or are we holding steady with the number of red, amber and green risks within the programme? And then a final question really in terms of confidence that we're capturing all of those risks, because there were a number that have been added in this month's report. Are there others that will be coming when the timelines catch up? And I think that is probably all of them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Faye, and I hope you're feeling better soon. Certainly, there are a number of lead members who dragged themselves in from their sick beds this morning, so I'm sure you'll appreciate the efforts they've made. Looking for a response on that, Alan?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the questions. In terms of the first one around are we losing people, I think inevitably that's a key pressure for us. What I'll endeavour to do, Chair, through you, is go away with an update on our staffing structures and the change that's come through. As you'll appreciate, there's a number of different factors, so we do employ less people than we did a year ago. What that I think we need to be really clear on is some of the reasons for that are different. But if I go away to endeavour to set out what that is and some of the reasons, because we do capture that as part of their exit and provide a bit more of a granular answer to that. In terms of are we confident in the mitigation measures, one of the key things is we design those mitigations and then making sure that whether they're having whether they're having an impact on whether they're reducing the score as intended. There are a number of target scores that you'll see that remain the same, that is unacceptable. That is not the way we want to run this programme. But at this stage, we're not confident enough that the mitigation measures we are showing a direct impact. So what we are doing is recording them as the same until we can show the fact that mitigation has had an impact and as dealing with the risk. So whilst I can't answer the question directly, what I can say is that we have a measure in place or an approach in place that checks whether the mitigations are working and are having the desired effect and whether we need to do any more. That does include resourcing, and if we have an issue around resourcing, they will then need to make that request as part of the programme. It is helpful to have that additional funding available if it is approved, but in addition to that as well, we need to work out whether we can reprioritise work across our programme management team and other parts of our strategy team to address that. So as part of it, at this stage, I would argue that currently the programme is as safe as it can be, given that it is incredibly high risk and of a scale that is significant and probably one of the most significant areas of transformation that most councils have gone through. But at this stage, the mitigation measures are having an impact. But what I wouldn't want to do is over-report that or provide an overconfidence without showing the impact on the ground. In terms of out-of-date reporting, I'm going to refer to Lou Routley on that one, just to give me a view on whether there are any particular changes from Friday to today, because that was the reporting schedule. I'm not sure whether we can answer that, but I'll just refer to Lou, and then I'll come back to deal with the capturing of all risks.
I can't report on the update of the risk report because, like Alan said, that was run Friday afternoon, and we've not reviewed that yet. But we'll be reviewing that later this week. And did you say about the delivery status as well, Alan? Yeah. So the delivery status, I confidently say that those that were due to be delivered between mid-October to today would be showing as being delivered in the next reporting period.
And Judge, if I may just finish off, are we capturing all of the risks? We believe so, having gone through other programmes like this in terms of the scale of change, but also looking at other programmes across the country in terms of how they've managed their risks and issues. But what I would say is we've also benefited from scrutiny, reviewing the risk profile coming through, and also obviously audit have considered this as well. So if there are any additional risks that members are concerned of, we've fed those in as part of the process. However, the scale and complexity, we'd always welcome that insight from members of any particular risks or issues that you believe aren't captured or mitigated fully. At this stage, the programme team believe that that is sufficient at this stage. There are risks within each of the project lines and each of the activity lines, but we're trying to deal with this at a global level. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Was there anything you want to come back on, Faye?
Just one around the timeliness of the mitigations. Are we confident that we're doing things with the right speed? Because there's nothing within the report that suggests if a mitigation doesn't happen by a point of time, that will then become a larger issue. And I imagine that there's a number of those mitigations that are very much time sensitive.
Through you, Chair, apologies for missing the question. We do capture some of that information, so we'll make sure that's part of the report going forward, so you can see has it been delivered on time and were the measures in place. I would refer to, for example, some of the work that's been done around the work to support staff through change and the restructuring process. So we knew in order to launch the consultation, for example, we needed to make sure the knowledge to capture and transfer information was launched at the same time and in a timely manner. So there was a deadline for that to be launched and implemented. That just isn't in this report, so we can go away and reflect on that. But those sorts of deadlines are reported within the programme itself.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mandy, did you indicate to speak? Yes, I thought you had, Mandy.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to defer to Faye first. So a couple of questions, if I may. The first one is sort of connected to timings as well. I note from the report that this risk report was run, I think, beginning of October. I'm also aware that some of them are looked at, I think I was told previously, monthly or bi-monthly. So my concern is what we're looking at in a really fast moving programme here. Some of this information is 2 or 3 months out of date. So I'm just wondering whether moving forward, the report could just give an indication on each of them as to when they were
last looked at, because I think that's relevant. My second one, and it's a repeated refrain, is those interdependencies. So we've got sort of 7 in red, 6 in amber, only 2 in green. And my concern is those 7 that are in red in particular, are any of those reds starting to impact on other reds, and it's just that cumulative effect across the programme. I'm still not getting a sense of that. And my final question is, how many is too many? If everything turned red, what then? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So when was it last reviewed? I think we can add that to the reporting so that make sure that you can see exactly when it was considered as part of that. What I would say as part of the report, and the benefit of bringing this report into scrutiny and into this meeting of executive, is making sure that there aren't any significant changes or issues. We would report them verbally to you, so you could then track any particular changes. So the reporting cycle we're trying to keep as regular as possible, but reflecting the fact that we do need to report to you any significant changes as part of that. But we can add the actual detail of when it was last reviewed as part of this, as it's now just a run from our new risk system. The interdependencies and the cumulative effect, what we've tried to do is group these up into almost individual risks. And I appreciate as soon as I say that, it's very difficult to say that these are all individual. But what we're trying to do is show that those bigger areas of risk that necessarily can be considered on their own. But as part of that, we do need to consider what the remaining interdependencies across the programme are likely to be. We'll only know those, particularly for the restructuring, at the end of the consultation effort, because we will benefit from all of the feedback from the staff cohort. How many is too many? I'm afraid, Chair, that's an almost impossible question to answer. What I would say is if any of those risks remain red for a significant period, that is a significant problem for our programme. We won't tolerate those risks. So what we're trying to do here is put mitigation measures in place to reduce the risk score. And that was my response to kind of Councillor Purbrook's question around, actually, do we know we're having an impact? If we're not having an impact, we need to review the mitigation measures, put those mitigation measures effectively on notice that we're going to change them, and be able to then deliver a new approach to managing the risk. In some instances, that may require new resources, and we'll have to come to you to ask for that if that is the case. I would argue that any of those that stay red for too long, and that by too long I mean in excess of, say, 8 weeks, at this point in the programme is a significant problem for the programme.
Thank you. Mandy, you want to come back?
Yeah, just very quickly. I mean, for me, it's always been a challenge with the mitigations on some of these that are there and whether they will truly mitigate. I'm heartened to hear that if they are staying red, that you will look at other mitigations, and I look forward to sort of seeing some more of that over the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you. And going next online to Sue Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. Got a couple of questions, an interesting discussion. I got a couple of questions. You won't be surprised to know that it relates to planning, and I was really concerned to hear that planning lawyers are on open contract.
Sorry.
How is that going?
I'm sorry, we're missing the audio. We can see your lips moving.
Sorry.
You're clearly not on mute, so I'm not sure whether there's a problem with the signal or device at your end. Perhaps you try without seeing your picture, and we'll see whether that takes the audio.
I'll see whether that works. I'm about to change my broadband provider, so hopefully that will make a difference. But I'm not holding my breath. I'm very concerned over the issue of planning lawyers being on open contracts and the risk that while we're doing job evaluation and everything else, that they could leave. One of the issues we have is actually getting signed 106s. The phosphate mitigation has probably made that a hell of a sight more complicated, and there is a real reputational risk, not to mention the complete undermining of our local plan on that is causing some real problems for some of our market towns and villages. So I think I would like some assurance as to what steps we're going to take to address that matter. The other bits that are of concern are of the 2 new high risk things that you've brought up, IP 006 and ITP 009, page 24, you're struggling to recruit and retain, and excessive loss of staff with talent and organisational knowledge. That has moved from low to high. How do you define excessive, and what impact is that going to have on just about everything, including the ability of the planning service to be able to offer planning performance agreements, which was one of the things it discussed at the recent agents meeting. And finally, I'm also concerned about how is all this going to impact on the performance of revenues and benefits. When we did this exercise in South Somerset, we actually found our processing of revs and bens claims went from under a month to 120 days. And we actually had to have assistance and intervention from the Department of Work and Pensions to make sure that this is done. This is a real reputational risk for us. And it's also going to have a massive impact on the people who can least afford to bear delays in claims, because we haven't got the resources, or we're constantly having to train people to get things right. I think that's a real area of concern to me, and I would imagine to the rest of the council as well, because that is where it will show on the front line if we start to struggle with this, what seems to be an increasingly high risk programme. Thank you.
Maria, were you wanting to come in? Yeah.
I just wanted to answer the question about revenues and benefits and the impact on collection rates. So that particular structure has been deferred, so there should be no impact on collection rates. The teams are continuing to work as usual. Obviously, all the income that they collect underpins the medium-term financial strategy, and it's incredibly important to our financial position, as you've indicated.
And Alan?
Thank you, Chair. And just to respond to Councillor Osborne's question regarding planning, it really sort of follows the point from Councillor Wakefield and from Councillor Rigby in terms of the work that's been underway to be able to manage and mitigate the impact within planning, and that goes for any service that goes through this change, but dealing with planning in particular. So a particular a specific board looking at how do we create stability in that service that's been referred to by the Chief Executive, also looking at how we can ensure we have the right recruitment in place, be them locums or permanent staff at this stage, and also the use of recruitment and retention allowances where appropriate to be able to secure the team as far as possible. We are acutely aware of the pressure within planning, and as a result of that, hence why there is a significant focus on maintaining, stabilising and developing that service. But the risks that you've just set out are absolutely part of this process, and beneath some of the risks that you're seeing in this report, those are some of the activities that are being used to mitigate the impact.
Okay, thank you. Can I just come back very quickly to Maria? I wasn't necessarily in my inquiry referring to collection rates. What I was referring to there is people's applications for council tax relief and some of the benefits that we do administer as a local authority. You know, that would be things like housing benefit, council tax relief, household support fund, and some of the other things we do. In that, if our performance on those drifts out, you could see people having serious financial problems because we can't get those claims processed quick enough. As I say, it went out to 120 days in South Somerset. That did cause residential hardship, and we did have to have support from Department of Work and Pensions in order to get back on track. And in fact, the scrutiny committee, of which I was a member, we actually asked for monthly progress reports to see that this problem was being rectified and dealt with.
In terms of the applications that you've mentioned, there should be no impact on those equally. The only thing that we're transforming is the consolidation of systems, and where possible, we're adding additional capacity. The household support fund is dealt with in a different department. It's not picked up by the revenues and benefits team. I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. I shall watch the figures with interest, and I shall certainly see the planning side. And another bit of planning that we mustn't neglect is also enforcement, because if there's one thing that really hacks residents off, is seeing non-enforcement of planning conditions or people abusing the planning process and appearing to get away with it. that's another major bone of contention that we should also be aware of.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Go to Councillor Lucy Trimnell next.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's just a quick question. Obviously, it's not mentioned in this paper, but I wondered about the council's key priorities and how they fit in with the transformation, because obviously they do need to be achieved. The transformation is going to achieve a new council. You can't really make these transformative decisions with those aspects in mind. So will you be fitting them in once the transformation is completed? So the four, a green and more sustainable Somerset, healthy and caring Somerset, a flourishing and resilient Somerset, and a fairer, ambitious Somerset. My thinking is obviously where we're making redundancies, where people, we're going to be smaller and have fewer people, will we have the capacity to do that, and how will we ensure that those four aims are met?
There's a competition to take that one. I'll go to Councillor Lysholm first and then to Alan James.
Thank you. It's actually incredibly important question, because those priorities, plus what I now call the kind of fifth priority, which is efficient, effective council, and that runs through, of course, all of the other four priorities, but I am now considering them like 5 priorities. So the work we did at the end of the first year of Somerset Council on the achievements, which was a piece of work that I put together, building on the work that comms had done throughout the year. And then I worked on priorities for the second year of Somerset Council, and that has formed a list of priorities under each of the 5 headings that went to the Chief Executive in June, I believe. And we have now, I've now seen the first draft of the delivery plan that comes with that, and that is still to go to executive colleagues and then wider colleagues much later on, when we've worked through all of those priorities for the year we're in now and into the next year. I think what we've got at the moment, I have to try and get an image in my mind of how we're coping with the massive pressures that are in Somerset. And I'm kind of seeing it as a warp and a weft, if you like, where we're looking at LGR and transformation and the financial emergency all going as 3 parallel tracks. And then I can't remember which is warp and which is weft, so forgive me, but across are all of the reports and the pieces of work. And as Sarah Wakefield has mentioned, and I've been hearing more this morning, the success of the work by Newton, that kind of all goes the other way. And in my simplistic brain, what I need is to weave, using the warp and the weft, something that then stands up, and where we can see the pattern of what the new council looks like. That's just my way of coping with how much there is for us at the moment. And it is huge. And those 4/5 priorities absolutely have to create the pattern. And everything that is put to us in the warp and everything that we put forward in the weft must create that pattern that we have said we want this council to be, and we did that through the 4 and now 5 priorities. If that makes no sense at all, I quite understand. I've been working on it over the weekend, because it's fair to say that there is a massive amount going on at the moment, and there is massive pressure on all of our officers, both those officers who don't know at the moment what their future is, those officers who do now know what their future is, and they have understanding of the massive challenge that we have now and ahead of us. Probably makes no sense at all. Maybe catch up over a cup of coffee for that one.
I think if I knew what walk and weft was, that might help more. But I suppose what you're saying is that they're the sort of woven into it. But I wonder whether they're woven in afterwards, whether, I don't know, is walk and weft the threads that go laterally and, you know, and then you're going to weave it in afterwards.
I would recommend the Somerset Rural Life Museum as being able to cope well with the concepts of weaving, warp and weft. And I understand their cafe is really good for the coffee that I think you've just been offered by Councillor Lation. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. And just to complement what Councillor Lation has said, in terms of the approach, so two big changes that we are making in order to track the performance associated with those objectives. First and foremost, we have made changes to the approach to risk management to be able to make sure that the risk management approach is really clear what are those big strategic risks that are affecting the area of Somerset and the council, and what measures are being put in place to mitigate those risks. That's the first point. The second point is also then to adapt and change the structure of reporting and performance. So that goes beyond just the, pardon the expression, rather basic KPI type approach, and looking at the delivery of some of those activities as well, so we can assess whether there are any changes that are coming through, any restructuring, transformation, or any other activity for that matter, government changes in policy, for example, or funding from government, what impact that is having on those particular changes, and be able to report that back through executive and also the structures, the governance structures that exist beneath that within the organisation. So the performance report and the risk report are being adapted to be able to track and follow those activities. I'll use the word track and follow because they're words that I get more regularly. Thank you.
Just to say thank you for that, for both explanations. You've sort of given a visual explanation, and Alan's given a sort of a data-led explanation. So I look forward to seeing how that works going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments from other members, so we return to the recommendation in the papers that we note the latest progress update report, including progress made in the month 12 September to the 11th of October, including the products and milestones for delivery contained within in Appendix A, and the current assessment of programme risks, which includes the programme risks that have a score of 16 or higher, and that might occur during the change process, and the status of actions to reduce these. Do I see a proposer? Councillor Lation, seconded Councillor Butt-Philip. Can I see those in favour, please? And those against? That's clearly carried. Okay. We move on to the General Fund Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 24-25, which is pages 49 to 114 in the published papers, and invite Councillor Liz Lishon to introduce.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is an improved position at month 5, but it still requires the corporate contingency of £6 million in order for us to project an underspend. So we have absolutely no room for complacency, and we all remain concerned about the projected overspend and the pressures within the children's budget. I'm really glad that in our reports now we are mentioning the deficit on the dedicated schools grant and the ongoing position there, because this is something that I brought up at the Local Government Association conference, because of my unhappiness when people say that there has been a fix for that, and that the fix is the statutory override, because that is, in my view, absolutely anything but a fix. It is literally just a statutory override, which means you don't look at it at that particular time. But this is going to become more and more of an urgent problem across the country. Not every council, not every upper tier council, I realise, but for us and for so many councils. So we heard from the Chancellor last week a recognition of the pressures of SEN, special education, all needs and disabilities, but there is not enough yet consideration across the whole country. So the delivery of the savings and the detailed spreadsheets that are in this report also went to scrutiny at the end of last month. Those savings, of course, we've already been saying this today, are critical to this year and therefore to the following years. and so will be the local government financial settlement at the end of this calendar year. So as I say, the government has indicated understanding of issues and pressures that are of great concern to us, but there is a great deal for us to await and anticipate in the local government finance settlement. At this point, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Nicola Hicks for more detail on this actual report and the many appendices, please.
Thank you, Councillor Lation. So I'll just add to what has already been said. So as we've said, Councillor Lation said, it's forecasting an overspend of 5.324 million, which is a decrease on month 4 by 3.127 million. Section 3 of the report on page 49 does summarises the main reasons for the change from month 4 to month 5. These are detailed more on section 10 on page 54. Just in terms of a quick summary of the positive movement, so we have seen an improved forecast position, because this is a forecast still, remember, at month 5, these have still got to come to fruition for year end. There's an improved position for learning disabilities budget of 1.159 million. Leisure budgets, there's 1.2 million as identified for this year. We are hoping that 0.8 of that can be carried through as a saving for future years. So you'll see that in further reports coming forward. So that's a positive move there. There's also been vacancies that have been identified in workforce and localities, and also some underspend in ICT, which has helped mitigate some of that overspend we saw in month 4 with regards to legal agency staff overspend there. We've also got some unbudgeted income of been identified in terms of financing transactions for some of our lease buildings. So that's a positive movement there. Those are all the positive movements which help mitigate the negative movement that we've seen in children's, families and education, which has increased from month 4 by 1.112 million. Again, the main driver being the high cost residential and unregistered placements for the increased number of children we've got in care there. So there's the main summaries for the change in movement. Table 1 on page 53. I think we've spoken before about highlighting the fact in this table that it's not always clear to the reader about the capitalisation direction and the earmark reserves. We've tried to pull it out so it's a bit more spaced in the table. So it's shown there clearly that after all of our funding, we do need those two elements in our budget to enable us to have the balanced budget at year end in terms of bringing those budgets in line with their spend. Also, just in terms of point 9 on table 1, there's an explanation around needing that extra additional support, but it is only one off, and therefore that will cause us a problem in terms of next year if we don't have further savings identified to balance the budget. As I've said, point 10 just goes through additional reasons for those unders and overs, and as Councillor Lation said, in point 11 we've tried to bring the DSG budget in. So it shows there the overspend in the high needs block and the budgeted deficit for the year. That's really to pick it out of the appendix. It was always included in Appendix B, but we're encouraging the reader to note that, because it really is a significant high risk for the council if that statutory override comes off. Also, you'll see on page 55, there's a new section around savings. So we included that in our quarterly reports before, but we're now including this in our monthly reporting. It's absolutely fundamental that we achieve those savings that were put forward for the year, particularly the huge amount you will see there that 75% are forecast to be on track to be delivered. We really do need to push those now into being achieved, when lots of work is being done with the services trying to identify whether we can push them into achieve, because if they were to fall into being at risk or unachievable, that would cause us significant problems and increase the budget gap that we had next year, because those would have to be carried forward. Just in terms of page 56, you'll see there we've included graphics around those that run at risk and those that are identified as being by the services unachievable at present. We are trying to work with the services to look at whether any alternative savings could be put forward for members to agree to replace those that may be at risk or are unachievable. The majority of risk at the moment are in relation to children and families, because of the 9.568 savings put forward, 4.156 are forecast at risk. We do now have one of the boards in place is a Children's Finance Recovery Board, which will be overseeing a mitigation plan in terms of the spend and the projection for outturn, but also the delivery of those savings. The other savings that are at risk there you'll see in relation to climate and place, and the majority of the 1.682 million at risk relates to the household recycling centre of 0.88 million, which negotiations are still continuing on recycling site changes. They're the main things I wanted to highlight in the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Shearer.
Thank you. Not so much a question, but some, oh, forgive me. Not so much a question, but some comments and observations, if I could, around where we are and perhaps anticipating some of the questions that might be coming our way. I wanted to say, first of all, that, you know, of course, we are continuing to reduce placement costs. We're continuing to try to increase the numbers of children we can place with foster carers and, of course, reunite them with families. Our strategy so far has been really concentrating on the small number of high cost unregistered placements that we have to use. And we have, as you can see from the graph in Appendix B, we have been successful in bringing those numbers down, but more recently we haven't. We've actually had more numbers in unregistered care. At the moment, we have 5. Right now, we have 5 children in unregistered care. And if things had gone the way we wanted them to with the Homes and Horizons delivery of homes, those 5 could have been in Homes and Horizons, either in the direct homes. At the moment, we have 7 open. If we'd had 8 open at this point, in fact, 8 months ago in the year, we might have had 8, and we might have had those 5 children in there. Similarly with our annexes and pods, which can provide space for 1 child at a time in a crisis situation. We don't have the annexes and pods in place yet. They're on their way, but we haven't got them actually in. So it's just that thing about we have got more in unregistered, but we're working really hard to get them out at every turn, wherever possible. They tend to go in crisis, and we don't want them to stay there. I think as well, I also wanted to say that we do have more than 30. And we had 30 more children come into our care in the last 12 months. Now that's a net figure, because we lose some as well as gaining children into our care. And it is interesting, you've looked through the months, which isn't in here, but on some months, say July and August, we had fewer people coming into our care than actually were leaving. But say in October, it went the other way, with 27 coming in and 21 going out. But again, just to try and indicate the work that goes on to try to get those children where they need to be and where we need them to be. Of the 21 that have left, of course, some would have, turned, I think 4 turned 18. Some, about 8, went into special guardianship or adoption, and then there were there were 18 that actually were reunified with their families. So it's that thing about saying, I was asked a question quite rightly at scrutiny, you don't see the urgency coming through. The figures don't give you any form of urgency or any form of dedication about what we're trying to do with these children. But I just wanted to share some of those figures with you to know that we are still working at that. The other thing that has a massive impact, and we've reported it here and in other rooms before, exclusion from schools is not one of our finest hours, I have to say. As a county, we are unfortunately at the top end of the table for nationally for excluding children. We know that keeping children in school is a massive protection factor for them, for their life chances, but it also has a real knock-on effect. If you keep children in schools, their relationships may, or their placements may not break down quite as easily if they're in school. And so we know we're working, and the work that's gone on in the last year has been around trying to develop our relationship with our schools, the maintained sector, let's say, so that's both our academy trusts and our own, to try and improve that and to work on it. And that's what we have to do. And certainly what we've been consulting on, because if you think exclusion is bad, but exclusion for those children who also have special education needs, disabilities, then of course our consultation has been trying to say, how can we use that very tightly defined and finite amount of money that we get through from the government for what's called the high needs block, those children who need additional support from from the central budget, which we, as many people are doing, are overspending on. We've been trying to find more sensible ways of doing that. So it's a lot of the mitigations are explained in the appendix, obviously, but I just want to share some of those data, some of that data with you, so you could see some of the things we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. Councillor Rugby.
Thank you, Chair. Not for now, unless it's to hand, but I wonder if it might be useful at some point if we could see a net saving for having opened those 7 homes compared to what we would have spent if we'd have been putting them in other settings, particularly unregistered, which seem to be the most expensive. And secondly, what's the programme going forward beyond the 7 that we've opened, please? Thank you.
It's certainly up until now, it's been about £2 million saving on the homes that we already have open, and so we've got 7, and the 8th one is in progress. As an example, for instance, an unregistered placement is about £17,000 per week, and that can go up in multiples of 7,000 in terms of any additional. So yes, thank you, staff need, because I was trying to say more needy, but yeah, if that's on a certain predication of staff ratio per child, if you need more, it can be £7,000 per week per extra staff needed. Can I say this? That money may not go directly into the staff's hands, but that's kind of how it's predicated. And because the demand is high, because these are emergency and there aren't too many places, then there's a market force going on. So that's about 17,000 plus another 7,000 for every additional member of staff. The homes are costing about £16,000 per home per week to run. If they have 2 or 3 children in there, which they should have, and possibly another one in the pod in the garden, you can see how that would average out. I think my understanding is, and Claire can put me right, we're working through getting home number 8. I think that's going through planning, going through the planning hands, property hands now. We would love to do the next 2 because we talked about was having 10. We're thinking about, and this is very early days, and Claire will tell me off, I'm not supposed to say this, but I hadn't realised this, but when homes are registered, they're registered either as children or as children with autism. And with disabilities, sorry, and you cannot flip between the 2. It's not like a sequential thing where you can have this plus that. So even if you had a home for children with disabilities, you couldn't put children without disabilities in there. It's the way it is. So there's some thinking around perhaps if we can get homes 9 or 10, then perhaps one of those would be registered for children with disability, because I'm pretty sure we could fill it. But that's as much as I know about the way forward. Do you have more detail on the next steps, Claire?
Yeah, so in relation to the homes for children with disabilities, so we are thinking home 9 or 10 probably should be for children with complex autism. So we can see over the last few years that the cohort of high demand, high need, high cost has changed significantly. So it started off just after the pandemic with girls with very high self-harming behaviours. And then it moved on to largely boys with county lines, drug type exploitation risks, which is still very prevalent. But we're noticing an increasing number of young people with very complex autism, which means that their behaviours are very difficult to manage. They struggle with the changing environments that they're having to move through at the moment, and that increases their costs because people are struggling to look after them. So having a home that could care for those young people, probably only 2 or 3 of them with complex autism, would mean that we would give them a stable home, which is what they need because they struggle more than other children with change, and would reduce their costs. So children with complex autism are the children who have the highest level of staffing because they can get very distressed and lash out when they're distressed. So you can be looking at £24,000 a week in an unregistered placement for a child with complex autism. So that would seem to be sensible in terms of what's right for those children, but also in terms of reducing cost. In terms of the capital that we have left, so we built homes or developed homes 1 to 7, largely using some match funded capital that we had from the Department for Education. There is another wave of match funding that's just come out in terms of application. We're in the application window now. We have enough left for probably most or all of Home 9, depending on what it looked like and where it was, but match funding will give us the capacity to develop Home 10 as well. So we will apply for that match funding, looking at that match funding being for children with complex autism and something called a DOL, a deprivation of liberty order, because the government are very concerned about that, and that is part of the criteria they're setting for the match funding for the next wave of residential care homes.
Yeah, I've got two things. First of all, I just wanted to say about the report about adult services. Somebody asked about this once before, about the costs of residential and nursing care being more or less equivalent to us. But just remember that in nursing care, there's usually an NHS top up that goes with it, which is why it looks the same for us, but actually costs more. And the same with older persons' mental health nursing, that also has usually has an NHS top up. Just to alert people to the changes that the budget will make to us, particularly the living wage, which we welcome, of course, but the national insurance employers costs, we haven't really got to the bottom of whether they're going to support us fully on that or not, but that will cause a problem for our providers who we rely on, and they will want to put prices up if they don't get it covered. So just wanted to point that out. We've also still got, at the moment, a number of what we call, shouldn't really call it capping drops, what is it? Depleted funds, sorry, depleted funds. Yep, that's the nice way of saying it. People who are in our care but run out of their own money and then rely totally on the council to support them. That is going up slightly at the moment. And this could go up again if the providers start charging us more. So there's just a sort of couple of warnings there. On the children's, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions really right at the end. When I was reading it, yes, it seems to have changed from yesterday. There was a bit that didn't seem to, oh yes, at the very end on page 73, it just says we await, and then it doesn't finish what it meant to say there. So I just wondered what that was meant to go in there. And I was looking, again, I'm glad to see that a high needs block stuff is put in here in detail. It's quite interesting to read it. Can I just ask the question, because I don't know the answer, about the INMS, which is the maintained school, where you have to put somebody in a maintained school, because presumably we can't, an independent maintained school, because we can't put them in our own provision. Is there any realistic hope that we'll be able to increase our own provision so that we don't have to keep using maintained schools, which are more expensive?
Okay, so it's quite complicated. So building schools and special schools is largely led by the government with government funding, because we don't have sufficient local funding. So we did make an application for two special schools. One which has just been completed, which is Hillview near Martock and Ash, and we made an application in 2023, I think it was, or possibly 22, for another special free school for children with social and emotional mental health needs, which is our biggest area of need, to be built in the Wells area. So the previous government agreed that that would be built. At the time, they were saying it will be built in 2027. There's nobody there in terms of doing anything on that ground, and I regularly, probably even weekly at the moment, contact the region's office to say, can you give me an update please on when this is likely to be built, when you're going to break ground? And at the moment I am regularly told that the government is not focusing on new build, it's focusing on the academisation work that they need to do, and they will give me an update when they have one. I don't have a huge amount of confidence that's going to turn up in 2027. I suspect we're looking at 2029. If you look at the Hillview School, I think that was originally commissioned in 2018 to be built by 2020, and actually was built in 2024. So it's a very, very long process. We are trying to do some work. So we're doing some work with finance at the moment in terms of looking at how we fund mainstream schools differently and better to support inclusion, which means that young people won't be going into the independent sector in the numbers that they currently are. We're also looking at doing some work in terms of having more specialist places in mainstream schools, particularly for younger children, to try and meet those special educational needs in a mainstream school, and support that child to be able to be moved through the mainstream school system, which is better for them because they're in their local community with their friends in their local school, rather than moving into independent, non-maintained sector. It's all complicated because of the finances around the DSG, and the fact that we have to rely on central government for the funding for school buildings for special schools. So for mainstream schools, if we have a need, we sometimes get 106 money that we can use to build mainstream schools, but largely not to build special schools.
And so can that need be accommodated perhaps by an extension or a separate building in the school grounds of an existing school? Is that how you mean to do it? I mean, I know sometimes they can go into the classroom, sometimes they can't, but you just need enough space, really, don't you, to do it properly? And I'm hopeful that there is a solution that isn't necessarily dependent on this long wait for the government to suddenly find some money, which they probably haven't got.
Yeah, so we are trying, we have got already what we call DLPs, extended learning provisions, in some mainstream schools, secondary schools, to try and encompass some of those children who've got special educational needs that mean that they need additional support, but that could be managed in a mainstream school. The main issue, I suppose, or one of the big issues, which is a national problem, is that when the legislation came in around education and healthcare plans, changing it from statements some years ago, the regulation around when you can apply for an education healthcare plan is incredibly broad. The definition is has or may have special educational needs in terms of the assessment process. So that means that practically anybody can apply for an education healthcare plan. Once you're in that education healthcare plan assessment process, if the local authority doesn't provide what the parent wants, and the parent might want an independent non-maintained schools, the whole focus of that legislation and regulation was parent focus. So if a parent decides, actually, I don't want my child in that mainstream school, I want them to be an independent non-maintained school, they can go to tribunal, and 96% of cases in tribunal nationally go with the parent view. So whether we believe, and we will quite often go to tribunal saying we think this child's needs can be met in a mainstream school with the support of the mainstream school giving a plan, in 96% of cases the tribunal goes with the parent view. And the local authority is impelled to fund that independent non-maintained school place. So independent non-maintained school places are between 65 and £100,000 a year. It's quite a lot of money, but when you think about that child might be at that school until they're 16 or 18, and we have a send duty up to 25, that's an awful lot of money for an awful lot of children. And moving that child out of that school is virtually impossible, because even if you feel that that child could now manage in a mainstream school, the parent could go back to tribunal saying, I don't agree, and that continues to carry on. It is interesting that at the moment, I'd say in the last 12 months, there are a small but increasing number of parents who are starting to recognise that independent non-maintained schools are not providing the quality of education that they thought that they were going to be able to get for their child. In most cases, it's not providing an opportunity for them to be able to do standard exams like GCSEs or A-levels or T-levels. And people are starting to think about, oh, actually, this wasn't what I thought it was going to be for my child. I think we haven't yet got to the point where people are going, so a mainstream school will be better, because they still have concerns about the mainstream system, but we are at least parents starting to understand that this isn't the golden ticket they thought it was, and we need to be able to work with families in the way we're trying to do at the moment in terms of resetting that finance to improve the resources that mainstream schools have to be able to support more children in school in an inclusive way.
Thank you. Anything further? Maria.
Just to come in on that last point, obviously the funding is wholly insufficient around SEND, as we all recognise, and Councillor Lation has already said, and any change in our operations need to be supported by a business case as to why we would do that, what the expected outcomes will be, both in terms of children's outcomes, but also the financial outcomes that we would expect to see. And I would urge members to before approving the report, to also look at paragraph 12 on page 55, which outlines the mitigations that we're taking across the whole organisation, that support recommendation 7G on page 51, which is all about our ability to continue to work with the aim of avoiding the section 114 notice by taking all of the necessary actions and continue to operate as if one has been issued. And that includes spending any additional monies. We've got all those control boards in place to prevent us spending money in areas where we shouldn't in this financial year, to help us with our financial management and our financial sustainability.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, moving on to other members. Councillor Rodriguez.
Chair, it's reassuring to hear a lot of talk about children's services, actually, which clearly we all understand the big pressure there is on that. And I want to thank Councillor Shearer for answering lots of questions I've had in the past around children's services. I'll try and not repeat them, but just a few things that I'd like some answers on children's services. That for month 4, you've got on there the increase overspend of 1.1 million. I'm just wondering, are we anticipating further increases in following months? And then on external placements, just noting that the overspend of over 10 million on there, I wonder if the steps that are being taken to kind of stop that upward trajectory is sufficient. That's my first one. And in the report, it says that the number of children coming into care are now above those modelled. I just kind of wondered why that's the case. And I just also, when planning, was it not seen as a risk for the year coming forward? Did you not see it coming? And also how it compares to the previous year? And I wonder if it's a unique in-year pressure as well, this, or do you envisage this as a pressure for ongoing years? Financially also. And just finally noting where it says the increase in cost pressures are mainly relating to the 10 to 15 age group with serious youth violence, criminal exploitation. I asked this question previously, but I'll repeat it. I'm sure I'll get the same answer. Is one thing I'd be interested to know if there are pockets of more challenging areas within the county which require more targeted resource, and if so, are you looking at ways in which LCNs or parishes could support the council and your objectives to bring that down?
Okay, just which one's going to say which bit here? It should be nice to have Claire next to me. But I mean, yes, certainly. I'll just say one thing before Claire will take on the detail. I think certainly we have been concerned about the numbers of children looked after coming in. That has been a leap. We've always been quite steady. This particular year, it's become busier. We haven't changed any of our thresholds for allowance. You can't. It's statutory. So we're trying to, we're going through a number of hypotheses to see why that might be the case and tracking ourselves in a benchmarking way. I think as well on the and Claire may, I'm sure, would say more about this than I would. The old adage about takes a village to raise a child. I think there is something environmental about those children who find themselves perhaps not in school as they must be, and so we need to look at widest way possible for those children who aren't in school and what they may be exposed to. Our our youth justice team, the violence reduction partnership that we work across our entire system with, a lot of those things are working really hard to track and look after and distract those children who aren't at school or are at risk to actually work and make sure they don't find themselves in serious youth violence, which can then make their ability to stay at home even harder. So there's lots of things we're working on, but I'm just going to pass over to Claire to say more detail, because she'll have it much more clearly than I have. But it's not just what we can do, it's what our partners can do as well, which I think is really important.
Thank you. So in relation to increasing numbers of children in care, the numbers have been very, very steady for a long time. So until about 2 years ago, we had about 550 children in the care system and had for sort of 5 to 10 years, really. They were very, very stable. I think it's pretty clear that the impact of the pandemic has been that more children have entered the care system. You can see that nationally in terms of the data across the country. We are still very low in terms of the number of children, the number per 10k of children in the care system compared to the region, our statistical neighbours and the rest of the country, but it has risen, obviously, by about 50 children. It has now stabilised at just over 600 children. And it is that age group of 10 to 15-year-olds and also very small babies, 0 to 2, that have increased significantly. To some degree, I'm not that worried by the 0 to 2s because they flow through the system. And as Councillor Shearer said, we have increasing numbers of children being adopted and going to special guardianship and also going home, because actually those parents have learnt how to parent and those children have been able to go home. It's the older age group that is obviously a concern. There is also in the last few months a slight increase in what we would call the 5 to 9 age group, who are children who may have an opportunity to be to live permanently somewhere else, be adoption or special guardianship, but some of those children drift into longer term periods in the care system. Historically, those numbers in that age group have been incredibly low, very, very low, and they haven't really changed during the pandemic either. It's interesting that in the last year, and probably the last 9 months, they have started to rise slowly, but they are rising. And that's largely around neglect, which may be to do with cost of living issues in terms of people struggling to feed and clothe and their children appropriately and heat their properties. So I think the numbers are reasonably stable now. The high level of cost in that, which is rising, relates to largely that 10 to 15-year-old age group where we have got serious youth violence. And as I said earlier, increasingly children with disabilities, particularly with complex autism, where it needs significant numbers of staff and specialist staff to be able to look after them. Where we're quite successful in younger children returning those children home, families get very frightened by the impact of serious youth violence, because not only is their child exploited, but they can exploit the family, they can threaten the family, they can threaten other children in the family, and families are very nervous about having those children return home. We do have some of those children return home, but it takes much longer than it would do for other sort of types of issues, if you like, because of that anxiety in the family, and also for that child to be able to recover, because they're being exploited basically, so their mindset has been changed in terms of what they think is acceptable. So turning that round could take a lengthy period of time. In terms of trying to work earlier with that serious youth violence, which is what the joint targeted inspection talked about, we do really well when it's obvious, basically, and those children are involved, the whole system does well. It's identifying those factors much earlier. So yes, there is a piece of work that we need to do with voluntary sector partners, with parishes, with LCNs and other partners to help communities understand what those early factors might look like, so that communities become aware of them, because you become aware of them much earlier than a statutory service would be aware of something going on in a community, so that we can work more effectively with the police and other people in the community to disrupt that activity at an earlier point, so children don't get embedded and exploited to the degree that means that families can't cope anymore. I think in terms of your question about is this ongoing or is it in year, I think the serious youth violence issue is a more significant issue in Somerset every year, so I think that is ongoing until we can turn that tide in terms of helping to disrupt it at a much earlier level. And in terms of cost, the costs go with that type of issue, so the costs will remain there. I think the area of work that we need to look at now in terms of trying to reduce cost and also improve outcomes for children is we've concentrated very heavily on the highest cost children, a very small number of extremely high cost children who are costing 17,000 a week, comes to, I think it's £884,000 a year per child, so just under £1 million a child. So we've concentrated on that area because obviously that was the high value win, if you like. What we're seeing now is that because we have so few foster carers and so few people in the system who want to be foster carers, we're paying for children to go into residential care where they need a foster carer. And those children in a foster placement will cost between £800 and £1,500 in a foster placement. In residential care, they're currently costing between £6,000 and £10,000 a week, just because they don't need that level of provision. It's just that that's all that's available. So actually, if we can work with partners, and we are talking to partners at the moment about reducing the cost of that residential provision down to a less intensive, less expert provision, effectively, because they don't need the expertise, we should be able to get the cost down to about £4,500 a week per child. So it's way above what it would be if they're in fostering. But if we can use that provision as a transition, effectively, to fostering, where providers can start to fostering providers can visit those children, start to get to know them and feel more confident they could care for that child, that at least starts to reduce some of the costs that those children have, and also keeps them local, because some of that residential provision is not in Somerset because we don't have enough of it in the county, either our own or other people's. Does that answer all your questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, and just reiterate what I said at the last executive meeting about the importance of getting our foster care numbers up to meet the level of demands that we're seeing. estimate of around 34, 35 extra foster carers that we need. More would obviously be welcome when you think about that point of there being 278 parish councils in Somerset. That's significant support we could have from our allies. I've been told some really interesting anecdotal cases from our armed forces community, from carnival clubs, recruitment. I understand that pride events has been significant, and dog shows, again randomly, has been somewhere where we've managed to recruit foster carers really well. So there was a huge amount going on, and there is a huge amount going on with our town parishes in terms of youth clubs, which are a great preventative measure in stopping young people being involved in that serious exploitation that we've all too regularly seen. So there is a huge amount already going on, but it doesn't mean that there isn't more to do in being able to mitigate the future demand. Mandy.
Thank you. I was just going to extol the virtues of youth clubs. Actually, there are some fantastic volunteers and organisations around Somerset, and I think we all send our thanks to them for the great work they're doing. My questions actually, unusually, are on climate and place. The reason I'm raising those questions is obviously we've got the overspend we're seeing there because of that sort of waste service large uplift we've seen. So firstly, I am guessing that's been factored into the MTFS because that's going to go on for another 6 years, I believe. Two questions around that. So we're seeing an overspend in the service down to that. Firstly, I'm not seeing any mitigations because I think I have asked the question before whether that unexpected rise in contracts should have come out contingency. I think I've asked 151 officer that before. They said no, it will sit within the area. So my question is, we're seeing some underspends as well in that area around economic development, building control, and climate and the natural environment. And I suppose my concern is that the overspend on waste could actually affect our ability to deliver economic development, building control, climate and natural environment, which for our residents are really important issues. So I just wondered if we could have an overview on what the plan is for mitigation and whether it's going to affect any of those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the comment about youth clubs. I do recall 2011 when 18 youth clubs across North Petherton, across Somerset, including North Petherton, were closed. North Petherton Town Council, when I was mayor, took on the running of that in our communities, as did many others, in terms of service devolution at that point. Who's the best place to take that question? Chris?
I think I'll need to provide a written response to some of that due to the change of responsibilities, but I would remind us that it was obviously a conscious decision for the council to enter into that contractual change around waste. There is a contract cost uplift that we're aware of. It was a decision made here, and we're starting to see that in year. It'll become a pressure for future years. Maria, sorry to put you on the spot. I don't know whether that's written into the MTFS for future years or not. Apologies.
It is part of the MTFS assumptions in terms of managing that cost, that new contracts, but for the mitigations, I'll hand back to Chris.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll come back to you in writing if that's okay, and we'll share obviously with the committee.
Thank you. It's just that impact on other services that I know our residents value greatly, so I'd welcome that. Thank you.
And as if by magic, a press release about a RAF veteran being a foster carer has all landed in our inbox as I was talking. As if only comms worked so well normally. Oh, sorry, my apologies, but it was serendipitous.
Who's accountable for that?
Right, so I think that's all the contributions from members. So we move on to the recommendation. That's the executive notes, the Service Directorate Revenue forecast overspend of 5.324 million for the year shown in table 1. Agree the mitigating actions are to be identified and implemented to pull back the forecast overspend in service directorates on an ongoing basis by outturn. Notice the total council revenue forecast underspend of 0.736 million for the year due to contingency being released into the forecast outturn shown in table 1. Note the progress and delivery of the approved savings programme set out in table 2, and note the in-year overspend on the dedicated schools grants of £7.509 million, an increase of 2.1 from month 4. Further details appendix B. Note the total forecast dedicated schools grant year-end deficit of 61.78 million. Further details appendix B, and agree that the council continues with the aim of avoiding a section 114 notice by taking all necessary actions and continuing to operate as if one had been issued. Can I see a proposal for those recommendations? Councillor Lyshan, seconded Councillor Wilkins. All those in favour, please. And all those against, that's clearly carried. Okay, so we move on to the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report 24-25. And can I just advise that members should look at the agenda supplement 1 for this item, when it would be on pages 3 to 30 of that additional supplement, and pass over to Liz Lyshan to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll start with my apologies for the need for the supplementary paper. And that is due to table 1 on page 6. The actual table did not have updated figures in the original paper, although they were referred to in the text. So the supplementary paper is the correct paper. That will go, if approved today, that would then go to Audit Committee on the 12th of this month, and then I believe on to full council. So it is the mid-year review of the council's treasury activities, and it has to be in compliance with the SIPFA Code of Practice. And the ask of executive colleagues today is, as I've said, to recommend this mid-year report to audit, make their own recommendations, and then both recommendations go to full council, which will be, I presume, in December. So if I may, Chair, I'd like to hand over to Maria for more detail on this important report. Thank you.
As Councillor Lyshan has said, this report follows on from the Treasury Management Strategy that was set in February when we set the budget. There was a supplementary update to the Treasury Management Strategy as part of June Council Agenda Item 21, Appendix B, which was the Gravity Enterprise Zone, that actually changed the Treasury Management Strategy in terms of our Table 1, the external debt and capital financing requirement. We've made those amendments here, but we've also included the detail of those amendments in paragraph 20 so that there is that full transparency as to what was added should any member of the public not see Appendix B attached to that June report. This is the mid-year. It covers the borrowing, it covers annual investments, it covers the Treasury Management Policy Statement and prudential indicators. We've referred to Table 1 already, and as you can see, the under borrowing within the capital financing requirement, we are still at the same levels because we are projecting to borrow the money that we would need within the capital financing requirement for the Gravity Enterprise Zone additions. The debt portfolio and interest average rates of borrowing are also included on page 8. Our average rate of borrowing is at 4.24%. On page 10, the investment counterparties are included, and on page 15, the figures and returns are included in terms of our investment figures for the period. On page 17, we make reference to all Treasury Management Strategy activity being within the Treasury Management Strategy and the prudential indicators as set. That's page 17 and 18. And the future outlook projections for interest rate forecasts, both on the investment and the borrowing side, are included on page 20 and 21. My caution to members with this is these are forecasts. We don't know where they're actually going to land. And over the last couple of years, the forecasts have been that interest rates are coming down, yet they haven't moved at the same rate that we have been expecting them. I've been expecting them to drop it to 3.5% for the last 2 years by the fourth quarter, and it just hasn't happened. So I just caution in terms of what the forecast shows, and we will track that as we go through with our Treasury Management advisors. It's important for me to highlight that in addition to this being the mid-year Treasury Management strategy that we need to present here and to full council, we're also including an updated revised flexible capital receipts strategy here, which is held within Appendix B, and it's on page 22, paragraph 66, makes reference to the reasoning for why we're doing this. If members turn to Appendix B, they will see that we are including, I mentioned this in an earlier item on the agenda, we are including the updates to the 2023-24 and 24-25 flexibilities. Now, these are the parameters that we're looking to work within for these years. However, the activity throughout 24-25 will determine what will be eligible within these parameters. I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions from members of the executive?
It's only a small one, actually. It's all about the detail about the SONIA, which I worked out was the something overnight interbank average or something. Took me a long time to find that. You talk about the PWLB increasing by 30 to 40 points or something. I just didn't understand the reference to those numbers. It didn't make any sense to me. So could you explain that?
Yeah, we track it by basis points, which is an amount of under 1%. So 0.1% is a basis point. So we track it in that sort of way as we're tracking through. It's a slightly different way, but we like to present exactly what they are so you can see within the forecast.
Right. So, sorry, so you're saying that 30 to 40 is point something, really?
0.3 to 0.4.
I think a basis point is 0.01% rather than 0.1%.
Sorry, correction. Thank you.
Not seeing anything else from lead members?
It's 0.01%, as corrected by Kat. Sorry, I said 0.1, but I meant 0.01.
Okay, anything else from league members, associate league members? Moving on to other members, Councillor John Galt-Bradley.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the reissue of the paper. I know I did read it and picked it up, and although it was there, it's really helpful to have it clear in the table, the updated table 1. So just a couple of things. I think for most councillors, they will struggle with capital financing requirement. There's probably always a bit more we can do to help the understanding of that. But for me, it's quite a historic paper, really, because although it's an estimate, it's the first time really we've seen that estimate of external debt going beyond £1 billion. And I think when we look at the papers here, you know, when you're recording in millions, they don't look huge, but this is over £1 billion of borrowing, and it's representative of the size of the organisation in Somerset. And I think when some people often sort of are not too concerned about local government, it's huge spending. We're a huge employer in Somerset, and I think this paper and the figures within it sort of highlight that fantastically. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Didn't detect a question there that needed a response.
No, thank you.
No, that's fine.
It was a thank you.
Yeah, no, I was just making sure that we didn't miss anything. Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no other comments from members, so the recommendations of the executive note the mid-year borrowing and investment position, that all Treasury activities have been carried out in accordance with the approved Treasury management strategy within the prudential limits and in line with the full delegations to the Section 151 officer, and approves the report as being in compliance with the CIPFA Code of Practice for Treasury Management, and recommends it to full council at the next available meeting. And furthermore, approves the revised flexible capital receipts policy for 23-24 and 24-25 as set out in Appendix B, and recommends it to full council at the next available meeting. Proposed Councillor Leishon, seconded Councillor Shearer. All those in favour, please show. Those against, that's clearly carried. I'm going to propose that we take a 10-minute comfort break now, and we could just have us back in seats at 12:05. Okay, thank you. So we move on to item 9 on our agenda, which is Housing Complaints Annual Report 23-24, which is pages 143 to 160 in the pack. Councillor Federica Smith-Roberts to introduce. Thank you, Fed.
Thank you, Bill. So I'm here today presenting this report. Just to make it clear to everyone, this is in relation to the in-house function only. You'll see in the front cover of the report a link if you want to find out in relation to Holmes and Sedgemoor's complaints for that period. We're bringing together this report today because we're following Section 8 of the Housing Ombudsman Complaints Handling Code, and I've got Chris and Claire online here in support for any technical questions that you have. In the report, you'll receive a comprehensive update looking back over that time period, and following the updates of the Housing Ombudsman from April 24, we've updated the report for this period with the stipulations as to what we need to publish. In the report, you'll see that we've detailed both the compliments we've received alongside the complaints, because I think it's important that we celebrate what we do well, just as much as it is about analysing when we could have done things better. And we also have demonstrated how we benchmark against like-sized housing providers in the sector. We have seen the number of complaints increase this year, though we did expect this because the Housing Ombudsman did run a Make It Right campaign that they launched. And this has led to an increase of 23% in stage 1. And again, as I referred to, that is in line with what we were expecting at those kind of numbers. We've also seen our stage 2 increase, and we know from our data that whilst we were expecting an increase, we know that we're not always quite getting that response right. Therefore, we have rolled out further training in the latter quarter of 23-24, and we're looking at also the new processes throughout 24-25. For me, one of the most important aspects of complaints is that we learn from them so that we work on the processes as to what we need to do better and to try and prevent things from happening again. On that basis, I draw your attention to page 154 of the report, where we've picked up the "you said, we did," and this shows the changes to our processes that have come about through the complaints. So we're demonstrating that we are listening and taking on that feedback. If anyone's got any questions, happy to answer, or Claire or Chris are here with me.
Okay, do we have any questions to open?
I probably should have found this if it's in there. I know this doesn't include the Almo because that's separately done. I saw that at the beginning. Are they complaints about the process at all, or are they complaints about the properties more? I mean, because I'm getting quite a few people through MPs and things complaining that they've got mould in their property, whatever it happens to be, and they are some that we own. So I'm just interested to know whether it's about the state and condition or really about the process.
It can be all of it. It can be about both the conditions of the property, but also about the services that they've received. I think there's a breakdown on one of the pie charts further in the report, but Claire, did you want to come in just with any further detail you've got?
Just really what you've just said, Federica. It's it can be, a complaint can be received if there's any level of dissatisfaction about either the way that we've managed something or haven't managed something. There's quite a fine line between what is a complaint and what is a service request, because if we've not been given the opportunity to put things right, and we don't know that there is an issue in somebody's property, then we will normally log that as a service request. So normally it's an expression of dissatisfaction about something that we've either done or haven't done, and that can be around property condition, it can be around antisocial behaviour, a multitude of things. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does, although I don't think, I'm just looking at the stage 1 complaint things, it doesn't say what they're about exactly. And obviously we as a council have a concern in 2 ways, actually. We have a concern about damp and mould because that's such a big issue since the death of that poor young child. And I'm getting quite a lot of damp and mould things coming in. And the second thing, I suppose, is about how we respond and how well we respond. And certainly antisocial behaviour is a big issue, but I mean, presumably refer people to the police if it's a problem. It's not really something we can do much about, is it?
Two parts of your question there. So in relation to damp and mould, just to pick up, we have got a KPI separate to the complaints. We've also implemented the new damp and mould process in line with the Housing Ombudsman Spotlight report. Antisocial behaviour actually can fall within our estates management. So we do have our estates officers that go and work with people. I've dealt with a variety of cases in Taunton East as an example, and they look to work with both parties to try and look to tackle antisocial behaviours between neighbours as an example, and they will work with like the local tenants and residents associations. So it can be a bit of everything, but again the police can also be involved when it's being logged with them. And Chris, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to draw your attention to the performance reporting is dealt with very separately. So we'd pick up all of the big 6 areas of compliance, which would include damp and mould. And also just want to remind members, it was an unfortunate case in Rochdale that led to the damp and mould issues and the death of that child. So just want to make sure we're clear that it was not a Somerset property, but nevertheless has impacted housing associations and housing providers across the country.
Okay, any other comments or questions from members of the executive? No, I think we're moving on to other members. Mandy first.
Thank you very much. I very much welcome the report, and I welcome actually how it's laid out and its content. I'd actually like us as a council to work towards such reporting. I think it's really helpful for our staff to complement the compliments. You know, we often forget those. It's also would be really helpful for me to understand where the complaints and what areas they're coming from. I think it's really helpful to monitor trends on that to see if there are more coming in an area. And I think it can be a really good temperature gauge of how our public are feeling. And also, you know, a complaint, I'll call it complaint for me, anywhere that our service has fallen short, that's how I would class a complaint. I welcome them because it also gives that opportunity to do things better and make changes. So welcome the report. Can we have some more of it? And I'd really love our complaints to be reporting in a similar way so we can understand them. And I know at full council we had a debate around it. I think it was in your annual paper. It'd be really nice to see some more of that and understand it better.
Thank you. I think that was a compliment about complaints.
No complaint here.
Councillor Woodrick.
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation I made looking at this one. Just on numbers of complaints, really. So looking at the report, it says there were 275 complaints at stage 1, 42 of them escalated to stage 2, which it says equates to 15% of all complaints. When I compare that to homes in Sedgemoor, appreciate that's outside organisation, but the number of escalated to stage 2 were just 4%. So I'm just wondering, what are the learnings that we're learning from homes in Sedgemoor, the way that they're operating and their complaints process? And is there much difference into what homes in Sedgemoor is doing or not doing that we're learning from? I'm just trying to get that picture of the two organisations. Thank you.
Simon, are either of you best placed to comment?
Yeah, I can try and do that. So we are liaising with homes in Sedgemoor. It's difficult to absolutely pin it down. So one of the things we've looked at from the housing regulator, first of all, is that this is no commentary on homes in Sedgemoor, by the way, but this is just a general thing. They are saying that housing providers are generally underreporting on complaints, and they are concerned about lots of hidden complaints. We do approach complaints slightly differently with our in-house service and homes in Sedgemoor, so it's not exactly comparable. That said, there is clearly some learning that we can take, and we are in liaison with them. As you'll be aware, there's an options appraisal that will be taking place in the next year or so to look to how we can join our services together. So ultimately, we will be looking to have one service on complaints across our services, however that lands and however that new function will be. So we will be looking at best in class between ourselves and the Homes in Sedgemoor. I can't put my finger on it, anything specific now. They've got a different customer services team that answer their calls. We're obviously part of a massive Somerset Council customer services. I think they're probably, as they have their own bespoke customer services team, they're probably tend to be answering their calls a little bit more with the housing knowledge than our customer services will do. So they're probably getting things right up front a bit more than we are. But there's lots of little differences that makes it difficult to sort of exactly pinpoint that. Claire, I don't know if you've got any more insights on that.
I have, if you don't mind, if that's okay. Sorry, Chair. I was just going to add, one of the things that I've mentioned in the report is that we're one of the learnings that we've noticed from that year's complaints handling is that we're looking to bring the resource for our complaints handling back into a specialised team, which is what Homes in Sedgemoor do. They have a team that focus on complaint handling and the learning from complaints. And I think we've not to date had the capacity to be able to really sort of put the focus on what are our complaints telling us, what learning are we getting from this. And I think that's our focus as we go into sort of the back end of this year and the new financial year. So we're looking to bring the resource back into my central team. And I've got a senior officer that will be focusing purely on the learning, the trends. With the stage 2 question, very much we recognise that we're escalating too many complaints to stage 2. Our focus should be that we're getting things right at stage 1. We know we're not at the moment, so that's a big focus. And I think a lot of that comes down to the resource and the capacity within the service areas. That, you know, we will list some actions that we're going to do as part of the stage 1 complaint, and capacity just sometimes doesn't allow us to then follow that through. So that's something that will be sort of tracked through from the central team with the service areas, just to keep tabs on those things. So hopefully that should reduce our number of escalated complaints, because we do really want to get it right at stage 1. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for those response. And Lucy.
And thank you, Chair. So I wanted to ask a question based around page 158, which is the health and wellbeing implications. It states at the bottom, obviously, that some of the housing residents have some complex vulnerabilities and needs. But it also states about work underway this year to address the staff resourcing issues. And obviously, I want to know, in which departments, which areas are we looking to get extra staff? Is that to support those specific people? Is that to support the system in general, so that those people therefore get the sort of help that they need quicker? And are they unfilled vacancies, or are you creating new vacancies for this, please?
Chris?
Yeah, so we've got, like much of the council, a range of vacancies funded by the housing revenue account, so ring-fenced funding separate to the current workforce pressures that we're seeing elsewhere across the organisation. We are finding it very difficult to recruit at the moment to trade skills, so those who might be being pulled to other large-scale infrastructure projects in the area. So we're seeing a real challenge around those trade skills, and anyone with a property or surveying professionalism. So we've got some issues there. So we're trying to recruit to those roles. And in some cases, we're having to do that through agency. I recall, and I'm sure Claire will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're also amending some of our resourcing around managing complaints. So if we can get our services delivered more promptly, we would anticipate seeing less complaints as a direct result. Not to suggest that all complaints are around the speed of delivery, but across the board, where we have professional roles, property related to surveying or trades, we are challenged at the moment in this geography.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. So the recommendation before us is to note the housing complaints performance and service report and provide any observations. I think we've provided a few observations. So we have a proposer for the recommendation, please. Councillor Federica Smith-Roberts, seconded by Councillor Wilkins. Those in favour of the recommendation, those against, that's clearly carried. Thank you very much for your work on this, Claire and Simon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Which moves us on to item 10, which is local nutrient mitigation funding allocation approval, which is on pages 161 to 174 of our reports, and Councillor Rigby to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go into all the detail behind this. We're all familiar with where we are in terms of phosphate and nutrient neutrality in Somerset. You'll also be aware that we've been awarded by government £9.6 million to help mitigate some of the impacts of the nutrient neutrality issue that we have, with a specific aim of unlocking new development, which has been blocked for some time. And the funding that we have will help to pump prime the interventions that we have selected. And this report sets out those mechanisms in more detail and asks that the executive agrees to delegate authority to the executive director and the chief finance officer as to how those funds are spent, and also to give them the authority to change that as the programme progresses if required. That's all I'm going to say on the subject. We have Kate and Alison here to answer any more detailed questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Okay, handing over to Alison and Kate.
Hi, I do have a presentation that I can whiz through. I'm conscious that is that acceptable? Okay, great. So the purpose of the committee report is just to provide an update on where we are with the local nutrient mitigation fund, and also to seek delegated authority to the executive director for the spend of the 9.6 million and for the move between the various projects, which I'll outline later on in the presentation. So just a brief background. Sure members are acutely aware that we were advised in August 2020 of the unacceptable levels of phosphates in the Somerset Levels and Moors. This impacts both Somerset Council and the west part of Dorset Council in the Sherborne area. As a result of this, a large proportion of housing development in particular is impacted and needs to demonstrate nutrient neutrality. But I won't cover lots of detail on that because that's been covered in many other presentations, but we have provided links in the paper if necessary. So just a brief update, the nutrient mitigation funding was awarded earlier in the year. We've got capital funding of 9.6 million and working to a hugely challenging spend deadline of the 31st of March 2025, where we have to demonstrate committed spend, otherwise we risk having to return the funding back to government. Longer term, the funding can be used to revolve the funding into the restoration of the Somerset Levels and Moors, but in the short term, it's to provide additional phosphate mitigation to unlock impacted developments and increase the provision of what we call phosphate credits, effectively, to trade those credits to help unlock impacted developments. I've explained that there is a risk that if we don't commit the funding by the 31st of March, we'll have to return, we risk having to return the funding. We have the interim delivery strategy approved by the Strategic Planning Committee on the 21st of March this year, and we're looking to ensure we can deliver additional benefits through nature-based solutions, where we are improving not just water quality, but potentially flood management, biodiversity net gain, and in some instances, public access. So just a brief run through the projects that was approved as part of the interim delivery strategy. So the Salinity Solutions Project 1 is a trial that we've been working with a company where they use secondary treatment processes downstream at wastewater treatment works. And this is to establish temporary P credits. Temporary P credits are a bridging credit between now and 2030, where developments that are looking to occupy before 2030 have to mitigate at that higher level before the wastewater treatment works are upgraded as a result of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which ensures that they're upgraded by the 31st of March 2030. Our project 2 has been the call for sites that we've run. So we've done an environmental call for sites that closed in July this year.
There's just some statistics there in terms of the number of sites that have come forward. We ran that call for sites not just for phosphate mitigation, but also to ensure we've got sufficient biodiversity net gain credits in the Somerset area to support impacted developments by that national requirement for biodiversity net gain. And those sites are all being assessed at the moment. You can see there what came through the call for sites. This is just some further breakdown of that call for sites in terms of where we are in assessing them. So we've assessed the full tranche 1 sites. So we had a midway cut-off point to encourage people that had mitigation sites well advanced to submit early. Those have all been assessed. We're currently assessing the tranche 2 sites, and then the tranche 3 sites are sites that we will look to assess later in the year. There were other sites that were submitted that failed the initial pass-fail criteria, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not suitable. It's just that some of those just weren't progressed to such a stage where we could demonstrate they were deliverable and ready to go. But they do offer the potential for future phases. Again, this just breaks down what's come through the call for sites in terms of the quantity of credits, and in each of the river catchments that those credits are available. We also requested that in the sites that were submitted, they put a price range on what they were looking for. What we can see here is that the amount that if we were to go with all of those credits that have been brought forward, we haven't got sufficient funding, and it exceeds the amount that we've got allocated for that budget. But that doesn't prevent these phosphate credits from coming forward as part of the third-party credit market, which the council has supported all along. So if we don't look to forward fund them with the mitigation funding, we will still look to support them in securing a legal agreement so they can trade them on the third-party credit market themselves. Project 3, we've been working with our council housing colleagues to support the delivery of septic tank and package treatment plant upgrades. We've got funding allocated for those the worst performing septic tanks, and they'll be looking to replace those in this year. So that will deliver approximately 30 phosphate credits. Project 4 was the council owned land assets. At the moment, this works very much in the feasibility stage. Unlikely, I think, to be allocating any capital funding in this financial year, but potentially in future years. The miscanthus grass, again, we're looking to trial on the council owned land, and this is again to support the temporary bridging credit market, which doesn't seem to be as well developed as the permanent credits. Like I say, the temporary bridging credits are those credits that mitigate for a short time up to 2030 for those developers that want to occupy their units before 2030 when they need to mitigate at that higher level. Project 6 is the new technical innovations. We're working with our colleagues in housing to trial these water flow control mechanisms, and they're being trialled in vacant units as they become vacant, just to see if there's any lessons learned, whether they are as effective as the marketing information says. And we've also met with other councils that are trialling these measures where they're impacted by water neutrality, not nutrient neutrality. But yeah, we're going to see what the outcome of that trial is before we look to roll it out at any great scale. So the report is asking for approval with the revised allocations before you there, and they're outlined in the report in table 2. So we're combining the project 1, which is the various temporary bridging credit projects, including salinity solutions, miscanthus, and other potential opportunities that are coming forward, where we see the potential for temporary bridging credits to support between now and 2030. Project 2 is the call for sites. Subject to ongoing assessment process, we're looking to increase the amount available to support that credit, those credits coming forward. And project 3 is the council housing stock upgrades. And this is just a reminder of the recommendations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kate. And so Councillor Sarah Wakefield first.
Yeah, can I just ask a question, which I probably wasn't listening properly, about the miscanthus, because it was a big thing when I was still working in the legal profession, and we had several clients who were busily planting away, and quite a lot of it's been dug up, I think. But I'm not quite sure how it works as a mitigation, and so I'd like to understand that. But secondly, are people actually planting more of the stuff, which you do occasionally see as you drive around? And because I know it's a fuel, but I know that it didn't work very well the first time round.
Sure. So at the moment, we're looking to use miscanthus as a temporary bridging credit as an alternative to fallowing land. And that's on the basis that it doesn't need any fertilizers applied. So at the moment, some of the temporary bridging credits are where you fallow land, the landowner commits to not putting livestock or applying fertilizer, but it means that they can't really generate any income from that land. If they can plant miscanthus, they can still generate an income. They can sign up to the same commitment that they won't put livestock on the land and they won't apply fertilizers, but it means that they can still generate an income stream. So what we're trying to do is ensure that that then brings down the cost of bridging credits. And at the same time, we've been working with Miscanthus Nursery, who operate just out of Taunton. They're looking to develop alternative products with the use of miscanthus, so recyclable packaging. They're trialling insulation blocks, and the other benefit with the miscanthus is it locks in a significant amount of carbon, and if you're using it in products such as, well, maybe not so much recyclable packaging, but certainly insulation blocks, you're locking that carbon away in that product. So whilst we won't be looking at that from a phosphate mitigation point, those are the kind of added benefits. But for the interim at the moment, it's just an alternative to fallowing land, which allows a landowner to get an income stream, which should consequentially bring down the price of temporary bridging credits.
Yeah, so thank you. That was helpful. So just I need to know, because I can't remember how long the crop lasts. It's got a certain life, hasn't it? Then you have to dig it up and start again, I think. And the second thing is it covered by a Section 106 agreement?
Yep, so we'll be securing the temporary bridging credits with the Section 106 agreement. And in terms of the life of the crop, I've been informed by Miscanthus Nursery that they've got crops that have been in place now for 25 plus years. So I don't know that there's an actual lifespan for it, but that's what they've said. Now, we only need the crop, we only need the landowner effectively to sign up and say the crop will remain in place until April 2030. But the landowner has the option to keep the crop there longer if they wanted to.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you. Something's just occurred to me off the back of the question that Councillor Wakefield's asked, and Kate, I wonder if you could help us with this. You said that if farmers can't apply phosphate fertilizer to the land, they can't get a decent crop from it. And it brought to mind Paul Withers, who came to one of our meetings earlier this year from Lancaster University. They'd done a study in Cambridgeshire, which found that typically land in Britain had so much phosphate applied to it over the years that it took 8 years before there was any noticeable impact on the crop yield when they'd stopped applying phosphate. So I just wondered how the earlier statement about farmers not being able to get a usable crop out of the land if they stop applying phosphates fits in with Mr. Withers' findings.
Yeah, I suppose that's got more to do with farmers' perception of whether they need to continue applying fertilizers. But for miscanthus, they don't need to apply any fertiliser. So that's why we're proposing the use of miscanthus, as opposed to laying the land fallow and then they cut the grass and remove the grass. But we wouldn't be able to sign a temporary bridging credit agreement to plant any other crops where the landowner would then say they would want to apply fertiliser.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at the one of the conclusions, 10, about the committed spend deadline of 31st of March 2025. My one concern that I have, as with perhaps with kind of local authority money that's given to various local authorities, you kind of sometimes spend or commit spending in urgency, sometimes without not committing to the best things, perhaps. I'm not saying that this council would do that, but there's examples of that in the past across the country. So I'm just concerned about that. Now, one of the things on here talks about the reporting back. There's an update report on progress, it says, to be provided to the Strategic Planning Committee in March, which is the 17th of March. Now, that is 2 weeks before the committed spend deadline of the 31st of March. So my question really, well, it doesn't seem quite right that from here until then, there'll be no update on the progress. So I just wondered, will there be earlier opportunities for committee or scrutiny to have oversight or have any comments on the progress? Because 2 weeks before the committed spend deadline doesn't seem quite enough time.
Thank you. On your first point, I do welcome the incoming government's commitment to reducing beauty pageant funding, as I think the West Midlands Mayor called it, which gives us that very tight deadline to do things, and sometimes that does lead, in generality, to councils not getting best value. So I'm pleased to see that commitment being changed. Councillor Rigby, are you able to take the second question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the question. It doesn't seem like a bad idea. I'm sure there's an opportunity for us to discuss this again between now and then. It's 5 months away, something like that. I'm sure we can find an opportunity at an appropriate scrutiny committee to have something of a review of where we got to at that point. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other members. So we've got recommendations in front of us to delegate authority to the Executive Director, Community Place and Economy to consult with the Chief Finance Officer to commit spend up to 9.6 million from the nutrient mitigation for capital funding to deliver nutrient mitigation schemes in line with the grant conditions in the financial year 24-25, and to delegate authority to the Executive Director, Community Place and Economy in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer to reallocate funding as necessary between the projects listed in Table 2 to ensure that the entirety of the £9.6 million funding is committed by the 31st of March as required by MHCLG. Do I see a proposer for that, please? Councillor Rigby. Can I see a seconder? Councillor Wakefield. Those in favour, please. Those against, that's clearly carried. And I believe that's all our business today. So can I remind colleagues that the next executive date is Monday, December the 2nd, which will again be held here in the John Meikle room at Dean House. And just to remind members of the executive that we have a further meeting in here at 2 o'clock. Okay, thank you very much.